session with Ira giving her introductory speech.
Hi everyone, good afternoon and welcome to Let's Move Youth Speaker Series by Charisma Movement. I'm truly honored and delighted to stand before you today to kick off this event. First and foremost, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to the Track Club of Taylor's University, our ski venue partner, 10 of our speakers from different NGOs of diverse background, the Charisma Movement Committee who has worked really hard to make this event a reality, and lastly to all participants who made time to participate in this insightful event. So Charisma Movement is a youth-led organization that aims to provide youth a platform for youth to kickstart their voluntary initiatives. So at CM, we cover a wide range of issues such as education with our flagship event, PAN, Project Anak Malaysia, environmental through our flagship event, which is WCP, Wildlife Conservation Project, and an opportunity to help the youth execute their project with Inspire Initiative. So throughout the next 3 hours, we have an incredible lineup of speakers, booth and networking opportunities. We will explore cutting-edge ideas, share experiences, and gain fresh insights that can propel us forward in our respective fields. So I encourage you to take full advantage of the informal moments, such as during the interactive session later on, because during those conversations, the most profound connections are made. Thank you everyone, enjoy.
Thank you very much, Ira. So next up, we're going to go ahead and introduce the NGOs. So we're going to start with Ida. Right, so after Ida, we'll be having more different NGOs, so stay tuned for that. Just give us a second, we're going to go get Ida. Okay, let's give a round of applause for Ida from Charisma Movement.
Hello everyone, my name is Ida. I am the Education Director at Charisma Movement for term 2022-2023, and I'm here representing the Education Department. So in general, Charisma Movement, I'm not sure if I touched on this, but in general, Charisma Movement's core values are about spreading volunteerism, youth empowerment, and compassion to action. We normally induct students who are in their infancy stages of project management and expose them to the skills of that via our 3 different initiatives, focusing on education, environment, and the Inspire initiative also is more towards incubation projects for youth environment as well. Alright, so what I'm here specifically for is actually to represent our flagship project, Project Anak Malaysia, from our education department. Project Anak Malaysia is actually a 2-week youth development project for students and teachers in the rural areas of Sabah in 3 schools. We have 5 main themes, namely academic performance, self-development, nation building, cultural roots, health and safety. So youth volunteers, 45 of them, will split into 3 schools, and from there they will conduct the 2-week program. Apart from that, newly established within this year, we realized that apart from the main program conducting it, we realized that there's also a need to sort of dive deeper into the causes of education inequality in rural areas in Sabah. Hence, we established the OPIs, the other PAN initiatives, research, data collection, community outreach, collaboration, journalism and advocacy, long-run rural expansion. So hopefully with these 6 OPIs introduced, in addition to the main community service program, we're able to have a more holistic, a more targeted approach to really understanding our community, hence maximizing the impact when we do these 2 programs.
Thank you so much, Ida. Let's give her a round of applause. Okay, so next up, Action Malaysia, we have Anushka. Give her a round of applause.
Alright, hi. So I'm here from Tutors in Action Malaysia, and Tutors in Action Malaysia, otherwise known as Persatuan Pelajar Bantu Pelajar Malaysia, is a Malaysian youth-led organization established in March of 2020. So we are registered under JPVM, which I believe is Janatan. We are registered under JPVM. And our main aim is to educate, and our main aim is to educate SPM students who are underprivileged, impoverished. So these are typically referring to that of the B40 group. However, we do extend to whoever is willing to register underneath this. So although we do focus mainly on tutoring SPM students, we have also in the past year branched out to other activities. So for example, fundraising projects, talks for SPM students, such as pre-U talks, scholarship talks, where we focus on not just scholarships, high achiever scholarships, but also need-based scholarships. So that is our main gist, but we do also do things like fundraisers, where recently we raised about 10,000 ringgit for 2 beneficiaries, one of which being House of Joy Pujo and the other being Angels Children's Home. Very happy to be here, very happy to share the stage with these other fellow organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anushka. Let's give her another round of applause. Okay, moving on, we're going to invite Amanda from Teach for Malaysia. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you. Hi everyone. I was just telling Julia, it's really nice for me to be back here at Taylor's after 12 years. So I did study at Taylor's, I did my foundation year here, and now I'm back here again. So thank you for inviting us over. So I represent Teach for Malaysia. Teach for Malaysia is a non-profit organization. We have been in existence since 2012. Yeah, so 2010 but 2012 is when we sent out our first cohort of teaching fellows. So we've been around for a while. What do we do? So we have this vision, right? And our vision hasn't really changed for many, many years. We call it the one-day vision. So the one-day vision is that one day, all children in Malaysia will have the opportunity to realize their potential through quality education. And that is our vision, and we do many things to actually try and achieve this vision. And our mission is to build a movement of leaders in the education ecosystem to empower, again, all children to realize their potential. So a lot of you have just entered your university phases or maybe starting a degree. So you have probably benefited from a system that is quite different but has evolved and changed over the last couple of years. So what does Teach for Malaysia really do, right? We do 3 things. We recruit fellows, so we accept. So what we call is development. We develop, we accelerate, and we mobilize. And we also focus on 3 different issues as well. We want to help the system. We also want to develop student leaders. So that is where we actually anchor on, is developing student leaders. So I think in the next couple of discussions, we'll go into a little bit more detail on what is it that we do and what our programs actually encompass. But first and foremost is, if you have time, you can look up what the fellowship is, because I will be mentioning the fellowship pretty often. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Next up, we will have Charlene from Next up, we will have Keisha from CU Sustainability Summit. Give her a round of applause.
Hi everyone, I'm Keisha from CU Sustainability Summit, and I'm the current program team lead. So what CU Sustainability Summit does, it's actually our first year doing this. It's our first ever forum as well. So what we organized was a global hybrid outreach program where we reached out to different people from across Southeast Asia, all in the name of sustainability. And we brought them together to learn more about what we do for the environment, what we do for the community and how we can empower youth to be more involved and more participative in being more involved in what we do around us. So I'm really excited to be here with everyone and to discuss how we can empower youth to then also perform their own sustainable initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keisha. Okay, next up we're going to invite Julia from the Council Movement.
Hello everyone, I am not Kasum, my name is Julia, and Kasum Movement is actually the name of our organization. We're a student-led voluntary organization. All of our members are students from different universities in Malaysia, United Kingdom, US, and we also have a member who studies in India. So we are endorsed by the Ministry of Education, the UKEC, and also we are the longest running student-led motivational camp under the Malaysian Book of Records, because we were established in 1994, and from there we develop and improvise our programs until now, 2023. So our educational programs and initiatives operates in 4 pillars, which is English language proficiency, development of academic and non-academic skills. Thirdly is exposure to post-SPM pathways and opportunities, and lastly, nurturing the council spirit. And nurturing the council spirit essentially means that we want to promote the enthusiasm of giving back through our community members, facilitators, and also our beneficiaries. And for now, we have benefited more than 5,000 beneficiaries from primary school, secondary school, and I believe we have empowered many generations of student leaders through our recruitment of council members. So yeah, nice to see everyone here, and thank you to Charisma Movement for inviting me. It's an honor.
Thank you so much, Julia. Okay, next up we'll have Anis from Parley Women. Let's give her a round of applause.
Alright, hello everyone. I'm representing Parley Women. I currently hold position as project co-leader at Parley Women. So Parley Women, as the name suggests, is a play on the word parliament itself. So we're looking towards increasing female representation in Malaysian politics. And primarily our objective is to see policy making from 2 perspectives. Number 1 is obviously to improve and increase the number of people who are policy makers in the first place. But also we want to make sure that people who are voters, especially female voters, are more aware of what role they play, what kind of policies should they advocate for, and what kind of policies should they support. And at the end of the day, ensure that politics is inclusive of all genders and all minorities, regardless of where you're from, your background, etc., because that is in essence what policy making should be considerate of. Yeah. So that's it for Parley Women. I'll share more about our initiatives later on, but thank you so much to Charisma Movement for inviting us today.
Thank you, Anis. Okay, so next up we have Sherry and Charlene from Sukarelawan Volunteering Society. Who would like to go first? Okay, together.
Hi everyone, I'm Sherry Amin. This is Charlene. We're both the founders of Sukarelawan Society. And the beginning of our story, I always tell people it was like an accidental surprise, because I was just looking for a group of friends who I wanted to do volunteering work with together. And to my surprise, we received over 1,000 respondents. So that's when we picked and choose the team that we have today. And starting from, it was a COVID, sorry my English, it was a COVID pandemic baby. So when we started, we did primarily crisis aid relief, and only in the last 2 years that we streamlined into something more tangible.
Yeah, so we actually initially started, a lot of our projects were flood disaster relief, it was a lot of homeless projects, it was a lot of projects with child cancer patients, and then we were sort of deciding on what we really wanted to do as a long-term commitment. And I think in the recent past couple of months, the past year actually, we decided that we really want to streamline a lot of our focus on energy poverty and indigenous communities. So that's our main focus from last year up until this year. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But thank you so much for having us today, and we're really excited to meet all of the amazing women here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sherry and Charlene. Okay, and next up we have Gerald from the Malaysian Red Crescent Society. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you. First and foremost, thank you very much to Khalsa Movement for extending the invitation to the Malaysian Red Crescent. And I think I realized that I'm the only thorn among the roses. So, do bear with me. I'll be representing, my name is Gerald, and I will be representing the Malaysian Red Crescent Society. It's one of the world's oldest humanitarian organization that is not only international based, but we are also rooted in the communities within each around the world. The Malaysian Red Crescent, to bust many of your myth or assumption, is not an NGO actually. So we are an organization that is enacted by Parliament and have been mandated by our respective governments to support the humanitarian services within the borders and of course across the sea as well. So we deal a lot with what many of you are also already doing, but mainly of course with the recent times with the pandemic in the supporting the authorities in immunizing the population and also ensuring that the last mile is also met, especially people with activities in migration as well. Yeah? Because we have a large migrant community within Malaysia, which are also part of our society. So we help the most vulnerable, regardless of nationality, status of legality, race, gender, religious belief, class, and political opinions, based upon our fundamental principles as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gerald. Alright, so we're going to head over to the forum segment now. So we're going to start with the first question. Can we get the speakers for the first question to come in front? I will read out the names. So it'll be from Tutors in Action, Sukarelawan, Project Anak Malaysia, Sea Youth Sustainability Summit, and Parley Women. Are we all comfortable? We are all ready? Alright, so our first question will be, let's discuss on the importance of youth empowerment besides its contribution to the community, be it at the present or in the future. So who would like to start? Let's go one round like that, sure.
Alright, okay. The importance of your youth empowerment besides its contribution to the community. I think the pinnacle of the future is the youth in general, which means that a lot of the things that we want to see in the future depends on what the youth demands from the government, from the society, and what exactly is it that, how exactly are those demands met exactly. So youth contribution can exist in many forms. It can be through participation, like actively advocating for something, actively trying to push a certain agenda, be a part of an organization, etc. But it can also be in terms of like being informed, like the ability, the want to actually be informed about the situation at hand, and knowing that once you're informed about something, i.e. be it a crisis in society, be it a political issue, or a gender issue, or any sort of policies regarding, for example, stateless children, for example, you want to first understand things before you can actually do something about it. So in order for us to actually be able to create an impact, youth have to contribute in being the ones to participate in organizations, to be the ones who are informed, who choose to be informed and to educate themselves about these issues. And they also have to be the ones who like share the information alongside their friends, because peers are what youth look up to. And if the peers are also looking towards the same cause that they are, then that's when you're actually able like to get changes regarding like more gender inclusivity or more education like regarding policies, etc. Yeah, so I think that's how we impact the present and the future.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I guess it's my turn. So for me, when it came to the youth, it was always a segment of the demographic that I was always really interested in, because when I was studying politics, I noticed that there was a lot of misconceptions. Youths were always deemed politically apathetic or lazy, but when I started working on my NGO, I noticed that 90% or higher, the respondents were young people. And it wasn't that they were lazy or they didn't care, it was always because they were not being nurtured enough, they were not given enough support, or maybe it's the middle child in me, but I felt that they were always overlooked. And so with young people, I feel like when you nurture them and you create the habit from a young age to be informed, or to create a habit of volunteering and participating more in the community work, and it develops as a habit that they bring into their adult life, and it's something that I've taken notice in my personal life. Sorry, sorry, I'm recovering from a cold. Something that I noticed in my personal life was that kids that were exposed to community work at a young age, they bring that into their adult life, but the kids that were not exposed so much, they don't really make a habit out of volunteering as an adult, and so that to me it showcases what you expose young people to is what you bring into the next generation. So,
That's very interesting. And I think it's true. A lot of people assume that young people wouldn't be interested in these kind of things, but when you actually try it out, you see that they can be some of the most interested people. Thank you so much for the answer. Let's move on.
Alright, so basically, I agree with everything Sherry said. I think even for me, my pathway into joining Sukarelawan was very interesting. I think the year that Sukarelawan itself was formed, I think 2020, we had conversations about how we really wanted to start an NGO and how we really want to be able to help, because that was basically the year where the whole COVID crisis had just started. And it was devastating. Everyone was locked inside their homes. We had no places to go. As young people, obviously, we were all like dying inside our homes, right? So we wanted to do something. We wanted to give back to the community. And we saw, obviously, all of these big organizations that were doing their part, obviously. And obviously, at that point, we couldn't join because they only wanted professionals, people who were already well-versed and established in the community. So when we realized like there was this huge group of people who really wanted to help, because me and Sherry, we're two little pins in a huge little haystack, you know. So there's a ton of people that we knew around our age gap that wanted to help as well. So that's when I decided to join, and I started off as just an events team member, and I think it grew from being just part of the events team to sort of planning of like projects together and realizing that so many people, not just from our age group, some people who were like sort of in their 30s, some people who were in their like teens, pre-teens, so many people wanted to join and so many people were willing to just help. We had projects where we drove around in Klang. I think that was when we did one of our projects for Project Kiba, which is the White Flag Initiative. And we had projects where we were driving around Klang for 6 hours, and these were students who were just driving around with us to send food to homes, to B40 homes, to families that did not have any means of food. And they were just doing this entirely out of their own will. Yeah, but we had special letters, obviously. We were allowed to do this at that point. We weren't doing anything illegal, I swear. But yeah, it was incredible, I think, when we realized that so many young people want to help. And if they're given the right means, the right channels, it's possible, you know? So yeah, youth empowerment.
Alright. Okay, so since the question is in the context of besides its contribution to the community, I think I'll take on a more personal angle for youth empowerment. So like personally for me, I started my adventure in community service and advocacy because the high school that I went to really facilitated that environment, especially being from like an all-girls high school. SMK P3 Urban really cultivated that culture of community service and empowerment from a very young age. However, through my ventures at Solidarity Pendidikan or even Charisma Movement, realizing when you contrast an individual that was empowered from the very start to be aware of their nation, aware of the community around them, versus the people who weren't, you see this contrast in how they view their position within the nation. They view what they can contribute to the nation. And from there you sort of see, apologies, I got a bit stuck. Okay, sorry, my point finally came to me. Yeah, I think personally for me, I remember starting everything because of Twitter actually, seeing individuals from TFM, from Parliament as well. We started our journey together at the same place. Just being aware in terms of how our voices can influence public policy, or how, because of certain initiatives or certain things that you're exposed to, you can change the trajectory of your life via education, career empowerment, and whatnot. So youth empowerment can really, apart from the community-wise, social and economic mobilization is really important there as well. And yeah, I think, especially for Malaysia, post-COVID, there have been many initiatives where, I'm not sure if you realize, like, during the COVID era, I think a lot of online initiatives arose, like Parliament, Why Politics, Solidarity Pendidikan, one of them. So from there you can see the turning point in which youth are starting to be aware of the issues around them, and they want to project their voices somewhere. And I think initiatives such as AOD, TFM as well, they mentioned about like school student leadership and whatnot, are facilitating the environment for youth to be empowered.
Very inspiring.
I think I'd like to take a little bit more of an internal angle. So something that we often see is that youth empowerment, what it does for the community around us. But from a more internal angle, what it does for each of us has also its own part to play. So we as people, we all play our own part in society. And I think youth, we're sort of at that age where we're struggling to find our purpose, where we belong in society, what our part is, what are we supposed to do in life. So being part of a larger organization, or being part of a group of people, like-minded individuals who also share maybe same goals, same aims, same career aspirations, being part of those kind of communities helps to build a sense of identity, which in turn can help us to understand where we want to be in life. And to further expand on that, to understand how we can be part of a youth community, right? When we see who is around us, we see the issues that need to be addressed, I think that helps to build more on awareness, which is something that has been mentioned previously. So to build off on previous points, to understand what issues there are, what issues exist. So when we understand those things first, that helps us to sort of build on our sense of identity. And from there, when we grow as a person, when we grow as people, when we grow as a community as well, we can target those issues individually, and we can further then build on those and to make sure that we address things that need to be addressed. Thank you.
So, Tutors in Action in particular chooses to empower the youth in a more educational sense. And so, you may or may not have noticed, but our founding, March 2020, coincides with the pandemic and lockdowns. And this was really because we noticed that a lot of people had just a general lack of access to education, whether this was because they couldn't afford extra classes or they didn't have enough devices per family to be able to view their classes online. So we really believe that education is sort of a basic need. And once we empower these youth via education, they can really focus on building themselves up. They can focus on social issues, economic issues. So only when you educate these youth are they more likely to engage in civic duties, volunteer, they are more likely to vote, they are more likely to be informed on social issues. So Tutors in Action really tries to give them that foundation of a basic education and sort of that self-identity so they can build upon that and really involve themselves in just the overall socio-economic development of our country.
Alright, thank you so much, speakers. We really appreciate that. We're going to move on to the next question now. Alright, before that, we're going to go on to an interactive session, in which case there's a question here. Stuck between wanting to be active in startups and also volunteering initiatives while being a full-time student can be tough. So how do you get a good balance between the two? Maybe anyone would like to answer?
Okay, alright, so I guess I'll go first. Talking about being a student and sort of balancing the work that we have as sort of chairing our own organizations as well, it's something that's very personal to me because as well right now, like I think being a student and especially coming from like a post-pandemic, online learning kind of setting, like I'm a medical student and I came directly from the hospital to come here for this talk, so I'm so sorry that I was late just now. I tried my best to save lives and come here, but I can say it's definitely something that is very challenging, but it's also something that's very rewarding because I chose my life path because I knew that I wanted to spend my life sort of helping people. So being able to do something like that and also nurture that in ways of sort of all the work that we do with Sukarelawan Society and working with different communities, learning a lot about empathy and learning a lot about the suffering and the struggles that all these other people are facing. It's something that I think is very rewarding, but it's something that you sort of learn. It's something that teaches you more about yourself every single day. I feel like when we first started with Sukarelawan, like our little baby steps that we had, and I think I was in the thick of exams at that point. It was something that was really stressful, but I knew that when I was doing the work that I did with Sukarelawan, it was my passion. It was something that I genuinely enjoyed. Even though it was work that I really, really was passionate at doing. So I think my advice, if you're a student and you want to get into doing charity work, or even if you want to volunteer with any of the amazing organizations that are here today, do it because it's something that you're very passionate about. Choose an organization, choose a cause that resonates with you, and make sure that it's something that you can learn from, because you're not just going to learn from the process, you're going to learn so much about yourself as well as an individual. So yeah, that's my take on being a student and all of this. So.
Anybody else would like to answer?
I think I can go next.
Awesome.
So taking a little bit more of a technical approach. So you've addressed you need to find your passion, choosing something that you really resonate with, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. But I guess to take a little more of a technical side would be to look at time management. So it's something we hear a lot of, time management, scheduling, deadlines, but it's something that's so incredibly important. So I started my journey with volunteering, with being part of student clubs, I think at the age of around 12, and that was quite an experience for me because I was juggling school and also being part of MUNs and being part of different clubs. But I really enjoyed that because it helped me to understand more about the world around me, and it was something I was really passionate about. So I really enjoyed that. So again, one really important component is it must be something that you really enjoy, which then makes the time management part a lot easier. Because if it's something that you are doing, it won't be work, it will be something that you are doing because you enjoy it. And so to understand more about time management, it's just about structuring, knowing how much time you need to allocate to your classes, which are very important and should take precedence over these. But to also know when to set deadlines, when your boundaries are, when you need to take a break, and when you may also need to take a step back, which would then lead me to my next part, which would be talking about communication, delegating your work. If you can't do something, if something is too heavy for you, share it with someone else. Tell a fellow teammate, tell someone else who's also in the organization that, hey, I need a little help here, and I maybe am a bit out of commission for maybe this exam period, but I'll pull my weight after that. So it's about communicating with your team, knowing where you are able to do something and where you aren't.
Thank you so much. Moving on.
Alright, so I think I'll share a personal perspective from running Solidarity Pendidikan, an online campaign which mainly involved high school students, and second is Charisma Movement, which we are involving pre-university students in the organization. So I think apart from like the personal incentive, I think that's never shot in stock when it comes to our youth. But second, it's more in terms of our lack of skill and exposure. And second is on a structural level, how the organization can support the growth of the individuals that choose to partake in the campaign. So for example, for Charisma Movement Project Anak Malaysia, you're running a 2-week campaign teaching primary school kids, but you're recruiting organizing committee members from pre-universities, colleges, and they've never had exposure to teaching kids. There's a lot of technical sides of organizing lesson plans and programs for kids, which even for me, admittedly, when I took up the directorship, it wasn't my forte. So in that sense, Charisma Movement, as a youth organization, has to facilitate the space and time to sort of train our organizing members and making it a place of growth, because we also have to be mindful that they're balancing their main college obligations, they're trying to get into all these universities, examinations. So in that sense, that structural barrier is something that I think so far a lot of people have been able to overcome. Like you mentioned just now, like time management, making sure that everything can be well balanced. But I think as organizations from the board of directors POV, the aim should always be to make sure that the program that you're running, the space that you're accommodating, can accommodate to all these youths and their struggles and making it a rewarding experience for them. I think also for high school students, I guess depending on your skill and time level, there's multiple ways you can contribute. One is like one-off volunteering. I think we all start at soup kitchens, at Sunagara, maybe for one-off sessions, which can be rewarding. And eventually, we sort of want to advance. Maybe you want to be part of the organizing committee. Maybe you want to be part of the board of directors for an organization. So there are multiple entry points, multiple different levels of volunteering that one can venture into. What's important is that they know what they're going into, what do they want to learn, how do they want to grow, and having the initiative to find a space that fits their idea. So if you think you can only do one-off volunteering, which is not so bad, Sukarelawan seems to have a lot of programs that accommodate that, so seek those things. If you're seeking for an organizing committee perspective, then maybe join things like Kausum or Charisma Movement that facilitate that. So I think, just to summarize that, number one is knowing your capacity, knowing what you want to learn, and second is being resourceful and searching for those places and maximizing the opportunity when you can.
Thank you so much for a very insightful answer. Any more?
Alright, I'll just keep this short so they can continue later. I think essentially another important part to acknowledge is that when you volunteer your time as part of an organization, you're also sort of investing in yourself and the community that you are a part of, like the cause that you want to support, but also the people who are directly affected by the cause. Because sometimes on organizing committees, like perspective, we're looking at things from like an organizational level, but on the ground, people are actually affected by these issues. Like when we tutor people, when we educate people about policy making, etc., they are people who are directly affected because of the lack of policies or the lack of a proper educational system. So think of it as like you are trying to invest in a community that doesn't benefit from the same privileges that you have today, and that's you trying to extend your hand, per se. But from a personal perspective, you also want to see that this experience within an organization is also essential for you to know people within the industry that could actually help you advance the cause that you're passionate about, and also to learn skills that you cannot learn from simply being an observer from the outside. Because let's say if you're like a law student participating, I'm a law student myself, and participating in an organization that focuses on public policy and policy making essentially allows me a closer insight as to how exactly does the industry work, how exactly does policy making work, and these are things which extend directly towards my field of studies as well. Sometimes the things that you're passionate about aren't related at all to what you are passionate about, and that's still okay because you see it from the perspective of like you want to learn as much as possible about things that affect the spectrum of society as much as possible. So you want to diversify what you learn, and like the things that you get out of your experience, out of your knowledge, are all things that could essentially benefit you when you want to apply for a job later on, when you want to focus on career building later on. You are part of the community, you help the community, and at the same time you're able to elevate yourself in terms of what you know and like the skills that you have. Right? That's all for me.
Thank you so much. Anushka?
Okay, so I feel like this might be sort of a repeat of just more or less the general sentiments that have been echoed. But yeah, enjoying what you do is incredibly important, doing something that you are genuinely interested and invested in. communication is really important. So what I've learned being in an organization is that it's never going to be 50-50 within your committee. So it's always someone is more busier than someone else at some point in time, and you cover for the other person, or at some other point someone else is going to end up covering for you. That is just how it works, because you do have other priorities. We're all students, so I for one was an A-level student when I started, and both my A-levels exams I had while I was actively serving with Tutors in Action. So while it is quite daunting, it is manageable. It's very important to talk to your team. It's very important. So we are a youth-led organization, so we are all students. It's important to understand one another and sort of work with each other. Yeah, another thing that you can do is, I think, integrate what you're studying and what you're interested in into the type of volunteer program that you do. So a lot of our volunteer tutors have come back to us and talked about, I think you call it the prodigy effect, where basically by them teaching a subject to a tutee, they start to better understand the subject matter themselves. So what you can do is, if you are a student of a certain subject, you can choose to educate, you can choose to tutor in said subject, volunteer in that way. So in that way, it's both benefiting yourself and you're benefiting others as well. Yeah, I think that's more or less about it.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to open the floor for anyone who would like to ask a question to any of these NGOs. So does anybody have any questions? Anything at all? If not, then we will, yes.
I guess I'll just direct this to anyone who wants to answer. But I guess my question is, at any point in time in your journey in like joining youth NGOs, was there ever a point where you felt like, I don't think this is gonna work out? Like, I don't know, especially for people who like started their organizations from scratch. Like, were there points where like, oh, this is not getting the sambutan, what's the English word for that? But yeah, the sambutan that I expected, or maybe like there was just a point in time where you feel like, I don't really want to do this anymore. Was there anything that like helped you to get back on track? Yeah, that's my question.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think I can get personal with this one. My experience wasn't that I wanted to give up because I felt like it wasn't meant for me. It was more that it grew a lot faster than I expected. And I feared that I could not provide my team the support they needed as a leader, because before this I've never led a team. And I was a university student in my final year. I was deep in my dissertation. I barely made it, I'm gonna be frank, and I remember thinking like, oh, okay, I think they deserve someone better than me, and someone that is more skilled, more prepared. But when I started my NGO, and I think the basis of every NGO here is a community that grows together and learns together and works together. And when I recognized that, I looked to my own teammates. And none of my teammates are doing this full time. All of us are volunteering, all of us have either our studies or our work, and they do it on their own accord. And if they can't do it, then I can do it too. And I learn from them. I don't take the leadership role as in the hierarchical way, I guess. I look at it more of like, I'm your friend and we can do this together. So I'm very emotional in that sense. And even when you guys were answering the questions about juggling your roles in your organization and in your studies, I really admire how organized you guys are. When you brought up time management, I learned so much from my own teammates. And I think that when it came to pursuing anything when it comes to running an organization or being part of an organization, is always making space for human error and allowing time to rest and breathe and bringing yourself back to the same space that you were in when you started everything. Because everything at the end of the day is all about the community and your role in the community. So I feel like, yeah, that was my experience. Hope that answered the question.
Any more speakers?
Alright, I think when I first started my journey, it was right after SPM. So I finished my SPM and I jumped right into starting Solidarity Pendidikan. And because our teammates themselves or our targeted beneficiaries were high schoolers, there's a certain security component to it, and there was a lot of fear during this time. So for context, it was during the pandemic, a lot of like #Lawan movements were going on, and you could actively see our advocacy, the people that we looked up to, being threatened, seeing all of these reactions. And another thing to consider of students as well is sometimes when you're a scholar, it's within your contractual obligations to not be associated with any advocacy stuff like this, political affiliations. So from there, it's a matter of taking care of the people around you. Sometimes people will have to withdraw. Sometimes your campaigns or projects will not be as gung-ho as you want it to be because there's that safety component keeping you in check. So sometimes for us, it's like, we really want to fight for this, we believe in this, but yet again, we might have to mediate to keep everyone safe, to keep ourselves safe. And sometimes, maybe it's not like those kind of barriers, but also family and friends. Maybe they're concerned for us and they tell us to like reel it back a bit. So that kind of having to reel back or being demoted by the fear, there have been moments where, okay, maybe we can't do this. Like even for Solidarity Pendidikan, we've been taking a 2-year break actually, because it got really, really draining to manage that. But eventually we all ventured into our own things to sort of reignite the spark in other ways. So even if you do get demotivated or you give up in your journey, I think that's okay. I think it's a general sentiment that sometimes advocates, we get very fatigued during the fight. So sometimes it's okay to take a rest, it's okay to take a step back and maybe contribute in a different area. So even if one idea fails or one campaign fails per se, however you define failure, I think it's always like a step forward and it still enriches you one way or another.
Can I just add on that I really resonate with what you just said, because what you said is so true. Like, when you're running an organization, there's going to be a period where you're going to be so fatigued, so tired. And even for our organization, there was a period last year where we didn't do any projects for almost an entire year because everyone was so tired, because before that, for I think a year and a half straight, we were just churning out projects over projects and doing the work that we did, we had to deal a lot with government entities. And that really adds on to the fatigue when you're dealing with kerajaan, because there's so much red tape and you start to realize that in the grand scheme of things, you want to help people, but sometimes the people up top, they don't want to help people. They actually make it very difficult for you to help people. So that is what adds to the fatigue, and obviously because we're all working, our head of events is actually up there, right there, hi Armin. And we're all working, he has so many jobs, we're both working different jobs, and it just gets so tiring sometimes. And exactly what you said, sometimes you have to find a way to reignite that spark. And what you said as well, that you had to find the same feelings that you had when you started the organization, or when you just started joining it. You have to sort of find that spark and be like, actually, when I joined or when I started doing this, why did I do it? Did I do it because it was work, or did I do it because it was something that I wanted to see a change in, you know, like you really wanted to make a difference. So yeah, that was a very great speech you gave there, both of you. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Any more from our speakers?
Alright, so I'd like to share a little bit of something. So the organization I'm with isn't quite an NGO per se like the ones here. We're actually a student club that then launched a summit which we held in the end of May this year. And it's probably the first one it's the first one we've ever had, and might be the only one, because what we wanted to do was have a summit to bring together youths, individuals from particularly the Southeast Asia region. And one of the biggest struggles we had, one of the biggest obstacles that kept holding us back and making us feel like we weren't succeeding right where we wanted to be, was the turnout. We struggled with, I think something quite a big struggle with speaker events like that, is the struggle to draw in an audience. And because we were targeting people used from different countries, it would be quite a challenge to fly people in. So we actually flew some of our speakers in, fully sponsored, from Philippines, from Singapore, which was also quite a struggle as well. But to sometimes have that thought of what if no one shows up? What if we don't generate a good enough audience? And what if we do all this and it's for nothing? I think the thought that comforted us every now and then was that if not for anyone else, we would still be doing it for us. We would still be doing it for maybe the one person that shows up, because even if that is just one person, that person is still passionate about what we are passionate about as well. And it's about bringing together people and still having that common platform, and to know that even if it's not the results we quite wanted to have, we still managed to do something. And in the end, even though our physical turnout wasn't very high, we did manage to have a total physical and online turnout of around 600 to 700 youths. So for a first-time event, I think that was a pretty good success. Thank you.
Alright, so sorry about that. I am from my organization's publicity department, so it is pretty easy to see the state of the organization in terms of numbers, so in terms of engagement, reach, social media insights. So since we operate on the basis of SPM tutoring, post-SPM, right after SPM, it's easy to feel disappointed in the lack of engagement, the sudden dip in views or sign-ups, registrations. But I think the one thing that really motivates me is my committee. I have met so many people who are genuinely so dedicated to their cause, and for a while I kind of lost sight of the fact that, you know, youths can be equally dedicated to certain causes and can be equally sort of inspirational. But I am always inspired by my committee members. They are incredibly all-rounded people. The other thing that I think is important to remember is that you cannot judge purely by numbers. So the people that we tutor are the people that we tutor and the people that sign up as tutors are not just numbers. So I do often go and look at our tutor testimonies or our tutee feedbacks. We do have feedback forms that we have them submit after sessions, and you know, it's important to look at their personal messages and see how they feel after sessions and see that they are grateful and that it's actually helping them. Yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any more questions? Okay, if not, then let's give a round of applause for our speakers from Tutors in Action, Sukarelawan, Project Anak Malaysia, Youth Sustainability Summit, and Parley Women. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to our second round of speakers. So can we have the speakers from Malaysian Red Crescent Society, Teach for Malaysia, Architects of Diversity, and Council Movement? Okay, great. So we're going to move on to the second part of the interactive session again. So a question that I have is, what are some of the challenges in youth volunteering and how to overcome it? So who would like to answer first?
This is what, okay. Hi, I'm Julia again from the Council Movement. So the question is, so the obstacle faced to achieve youth empowerment and what the participants can do to overcome the challenge. So being in a student-led organization, I believe that the obstacles faced are lack of resources, I would say, because we're all like youth students and we do have the strong passion, the strong energy, and probably the ideas to tackle any issues that we're aiming to tackle, but probably we lack resources in terms of like manpower, facilities, and this goes back to like one of Kalsom's core values, which is first we initiate, second we impact, and thirdly we involve. So in terms of involvement, we really hope that not just for Kalsom movement, but for other NGOs as well, we get enough support from corporate bodies, from the government, and so on, because I guess that's one of the biggest obstacles, and due to like lack of resources, that would affect our initiatives eventually, like how of quality it would be, and if we manage to create the impact that we aimed for, essentially. So on how to overcome it, I guess like making connections between us NGOs, I think that's one of the ways to overcome that specific challenge, because like when we work together, it will be a collective effort in tackling the issues that we have in common. Like for example, the Council Movement have worked with Teach for Malaysia in terms of our facilitator trainings, where we do our educational programs similar to the Charisma Movement just now. Our facilitators are from various backgrounds, and most of them are not even from the educational background. So like personally, I studied law, and my first involvement in Kalsum was as a facilitator. I've never had the experience to teach children before, and the subject matter itself of the program I joined is not of my background. But thankfully, the organizing committee provided us like sufficient training, and those trainings are sourced from other organizations that they collaborated with. So yeah, I guess the particular obstacle in terms of resources, it's nice to have good connections between NGOs and other sectors that can help us in creating impact and change.
Thank you so much. Should I go next?
Hello? Yeah, so what was the question? Challenges.
It's offered. Oh, this is the.
Okay,
I'll read out the question again. So, what are some of the challenges in youth volunteering and how to overcome it?
Okay. So some of the, I'm not a youth anymore, but some of the challenges that I've seen that youths actually go through and have is encouragement. So I feel like sometimes adults usually push youths aside, or they don't give them enough encouragement to tell them that actually you can do this, or this is important, your voice matters. So youth voice matters, right? And that is something that is not said out loud enough, I would say. So most of the time, young people feel like, I do not have anything to contribute, or I am insignificant. And I think that is a whole different challenge by itself, right, to overcome this. Which is where Teach for Malaysia, we are trying to overcome this from a very young age. So when children are in school, primary school, secondary school, and we only work behind needs communities. So we have fellows who work in Orang Asli and Orang Asal schools. And most of this community, most of these children don't speak English or Malay. So how can they feel encouraged to actually participate and volunteer and help their own community later on? Which is why earlier I mentioned about student leadership. Because what we want to do is actually teach them and tell them that you are a leader of your own learning. You take control of how you want to develop. The education system is a beast and a monster by itself. It's a system that is so complex and just so difficult to understand, right? A child cannot understand what are the obstacles put in front of them, but they are going to grow up in this system. So what can all of us who do come from a certain level of privilege actually help and contribute to helping these other members of the community develop themselves? Because if every member of the community, like I go back to our one day vision, right? So one day every child, right, you have an access to good education, equitable education. What would that look like for the country? You are a citizen of Malaysia, what role would you play? Because everybody has a role to play. You don't exist in silo, you don't exist in a bubble. But how do we all contribute back to this? So one way is, young people, you do not have funds, right? You are not a corporate entity. You do not have millions and billions of dollars to spend. You are not the government. You do not make policy decisions. You do not change law. But what you have is a lot of capability, and I feel like young people have the heart, right? You are very highly motivated at this point in time because your lens of what is possible, your optimism is very high. It's very high. But what are you going to do with this optimism and this sense of possibility? Is volunteer your time, right? You have time. So challenges aside, because the earlier panel spoke about how you can actually organize yourself. But what do you do with all of this knowledge, right? Like, and another thing is the tutoring. We run a tutoring program as well. So we work with PPR communities and we recruit young people from universities to tutor every Saturday for about just 2 to 3 hours, so not very long. And you don't even have to do lesson plan because we do that for you. We give you all the materials. You just turn up there and you tutor a child from a B40 community. And these children have been very badly impacted by the pandemic. So the learning loss and the learning gap is just very big, right? So when I'm on the ground, I see how these children, they actually want to learn. They just don't know how. And the thing is, the teachers do not have the capacity to actually give the attention that individual children require, which is why we need volunteers. We need people to spend just at least 2 to 3 hours of your time on a weekly basis helping these children learn to read. Because I had a student who was 11 years old and he couldn't read or write. But when I verbalized the questions to him, he could 100% answer me. So it's not that this kid did not understand what was going on, he just did not have that particular skill. Because of the pandemic, he didn't go to school, right? And now he's going through a literacy class. And there's been improvement. And there's been another child who loved the volunteer who was teaching him so much that he would come every week, right? And his mother came up to me and my colleague and was like, "Are you coming back?" Because we had a break, right? She's like, "Are you coming back?" We're like, "Yes, we are." She's like, "I've noticed a difference in my child." Because the way we do tutoring is not just academic, it is also non-academic skills. We teach them confidence, we build up communication skills, we help them feel a lot, we help them understand emotions, right? Because all these children go through emotions, even youths, all of you are going through different types of emotions. We help them understand. So these are all, as important as academic skills are, non-academic skills are also important. So these are some of the things that we are trying to do. But what we did is, and to be honest, it's not Teach for Malaysia staff who do this, it's our volunteers. Right? So like what Julia was saying, we work together, we do onboarding for training, we train some of their volunteers, some of their mentors. We do the same thing with even our corporate volunteers, and we're like, here is all the information you need to do this. Now go and do it, right? Because everybody needs to do this. It's not just Teach for Malaysia who's going to do this. So that's some of the things that we've noticed, right? So the challenges of how do we encourage, how do we motivate, which is very, very important, especially when it comes to young people feeling empowered to actually take that first step to say, okay, I'm interested in helping to change the system. What is the smallest thing that I can do? The smallest thing is just take that first step, look for something that you want to help with, and just pursue that for as long as you can, right? If you cannot, it's okay, but try. It's always just try. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
Sorry. Hi everyone, my name is Charlene. I'm from Architects of Diversity. I'm just going to do a quick intro. Yeah. So Architects of Diversity is a non-profit that bridges communities and identity groups, right? So I don't need to tell all of you that Malaysia unfortunately is getting a bit more polarized along racial and religious lines. So Architects of Diversity is trying to handle that problem we primarily run youth programs. So in fact, the president of the MUN club here is actually one of our alumni. If you're, yeah. So, okay, so now we go to the question, yeah? Oh, so you don't need a slide already. Thank you. Okay, go back to the question slide. Thanks. Oh, and also shout out to everyone who is joining us online. Thanks for being here, as well as everybody who's also here physically. Obstacles to achieve youth empowerment. I think just adding on to your point, right? Not just resources, right? But it's also the lack of an ecosystem. Malaysia doesn't have an ecosystem for youth volunteering. Like in a lot of other countries, it's built into their education curriculum. Like you have to fulfill a certain amount of hours. I know MCKL has like a community service syllabus thing, class. But you know, in Malaysia, I don't know whether yours still have MPU, moral studies. But my time, the moral studies was just you do a play and then finish. That's all. So the ecosystem of getting people used to the idea of doing volunteering, doing community work is not there. That's one, right? The idea of it. The second part is, like what you said, resources. Because young people often don't have the network, they don't have the connections, they don't have the funds to do anything. And a lot of times, if you want to get funds, if you are lucky enough to find a corporate sponsor, the corporate sponsor will ask you, okay, you need to register under SSM, you need to have a bank account, you need to whatever, you need to officialize everything, which is fair if you want to like talk about fraud prevention, right? But these are a lot of barriers that hinder access to youth volunteering, to youth empowerment. But that's from making your own NGO or starting your own movement, right? But I think Amanda's point to kind of actually volunteering is also very apt. Like if you think about it, how many NGOs or youth NGOs that you're aware of primarily speak English and are primarily based in the Klang Valley? How many NGOs do you know are based in the East Coast, Kelantan, Terengganu, or Sabah, Sarawak? How many of them reach out to Orang Asal, Orang Asli communities? There's so many different types of barriers and I guess obstacles in place. So that's the challenges lah, I would say. The overcoming is a lot harder. And I'll be the first to say that I don't have a foolproof answer, and it's a very wicked, complex problem that doesn't have a silver bullet to it, right? But I think it goes back to what I said about the ecosystem, which is that we need to build an ecosystem that will allow or that will empower youths to be more active in volunteering. So if you're thinking about funding, if you're thinking about access through language, through geography, you need to put all these things in place. You need to mobilize, you need to build network ground networks in different states in order to empower youths to be able to participate. So I just want to plug a bit that Architects of Diversity has an upcoming incubator/accelerator for young NGOs and initiatives. So if you have an idea or existing initiative that focuses on building a more inclusive Malaysia, you can check out our social media. It will launch sometime in October. Thanks for the plug. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Cool, thanks. So from the Malaysian Red Crescent, and you might be wondering what I'm doing here also, like, because the perception is we're always in schools marching and doing first aid. So that's something that we are also challenging ourselves as well, and trying to break that stereotype or prejudice or some of the misconceptions that you have towards the Malaysian Red Crescent. We are a humanitarian-based organization, and whatever impacts the youth, of course, impacts us as humanity as well, right? You look at all the social issues that are happening around the world, the polarization, as some of our panel colleagues here have mentioned as well. So in terms of youth empowerment within our organization, within our humanitarian organization, we are a very large organization, and although we do a lot of activities for the youth, we do not necessarily incorporate their voices or their needs. And that's something that as an organization, that is this year we're celebrating our 75th year of anniversary of our founding. Even older than Malaysia actually. It's very difficult to change that mindset, yeah? So, but I'm the deputy chairperson of our National Youth Council, and I'm also here sitting representing our chairperson, who is currently unavailable, who is a female. So that's also a good thing. we are really trying to create this enabling environment for youth. And although we have begun to do so, I think most people view youth empowerment as like, yeah, we have a platform for youth. You guys just get together and do your own thing and leave you aside. Whereas the senior leaders and the senior policymakers, decision makers are still doing their own thing. And okay, at least we do a checkbox. Like, okay, we have a youth rubber stamp body that will endorse this strategy and give their input and so on and so forth. We're trying to move beyond that through our youth engagement strategy, where we basically see young people nowadays as three main elements, which is one, young people as members of affected communities, being the people who are affected by themselves. Secondly, also is looking at how our young people would like to act as volunteers, how they would like to engage meaningfully with us as an organization. And thirdly is also how young people can contribute to the leadership and direction of the organization, which is something we are also not just being seated at the table, but actually being incorporated as part of the discussion. And something that we are really trying to, some of the obstacles we are trying to overcome. And how can you guys, young people, here physically and also online, can do is always continue to voice out your concerns. But at the same time, we have to find that fine line of not seeming that we are constantly whining as young people. I'm still young, I know I look a bit older, but yeah, I'm still within the youth category, at least for us in the Red Cross and Red Crescent below 30 years old. And we are trying to find that fine line of trying not to sound too whiny to them, but at the same time, trying to have conversations and dialogues. And we always hear about intercultural dialogues to improve perceptions and our opinions. But what we're trying to do more in our organization is what we call intergenerational dialogues. Trying to really practice active listening, practicing empathy, all of these soft skills to on one side, understand the perspective of our leaders and why, and to learn from their experiences as well, because we think we know it all and we are young people and all, but sometimes it's always good to discuss with our forefathers or the ones who are much more experienced, and just to get a bit of a glimpse. Of course, their situation and our situation, their time and our time would be different, but it would be good to get some learning as well. And at the same time, during those conversations, during those interaction engagements, that's where we can share how we feel and how to have more meaningful rather than a formal thing. Just have a chit chat over like a coffee, and you'll be actually inspired that our leaders actually do want to believe in us, but sometimes, of course, how media portray us or how sometimes we act in terms of advocacy or movement, we are quite impatient. We also need to see it from their lens and how the world works as well, and to try to be that bridge between that two. I think that's something that we as young people also have to sometimes take a step back, take 2 steps back before we actually jump forward, right? And that's something I think it's very important for young people to also factor in. That's me included as well at times, So those are the things that we are trying to do a lot more in the Malaysian Red Crescent. And the unique thing is that, also just a plug, that we have that access. We have access to governments and policymakers. During COVID-19, we are auxiliary to the government. We are mandated by the government to support them in times of crisis, not just in health. If you're looking at geopolitically as well, in terms of international humanitarian law, the importance of how political instability and if conflict were to break out, the Red Cross and Red Crescent would be at the forefront of providing humanitarian services, as mandated by law and as mandated by the Geneva Conventions as well. But the thing is, we want young people to know that you guys can contribute as well. This is something that should bother you, that should concern you. Yes, conflicts and all of this may seem far away, but once it happened, if you look at Ukraine, all of the things that we have built, we've been trying so hard to build, through education, through access to healthcare, clean water, safe shelter, migration, access to legal assistance, all of this will break down, and that's something that we're also trying to do through some of our programming, such as what we call Youth as Agents of Behavioral Change, where we do teach young people as well to be able to think critically on thematic intra and interpersonal skills, active listening, violence prevention, mitigation and response, non-discrimination, intercultural dialogues, to combat the things that we are facing, that we see in this world today, that the media is trying to polarize us more and more, division, political division, racial division, generational division, if you're talking about youth empowerment, and so on and so forth. So that's something we're really trying very hard to combat, but at the same time, trying to break the conception that we are also offering these platforms for the young people to advocate, of course, according to the principles of being apolitical and a-religious as well. So yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we're gonna move on to a quick little break session. So let's everyone take a second to recharge, and then we'll be back as soon as we can. Hi guys, we're going to continue the session. Are we all ready to start? Okay, I'll give it like a few minutes till everyone gets back.
You want to control the effort. Question 2 No, I just changed it.
Alright, so we're gonna move onward with the second part of the segment. I hope everyone is feeling a bit more recharged and a bit rested. So for this next part, before we go on to any more questions, we've actually done something pretty interesting. So there is a question that is underneath one of you guys' chairs. So I want you guys to take a second and look under your chairs to see if there's any questions. A piece of paper, like right underneath. And if there is, can you please raise your hands? I think I see it over there. You have a question? Okay, so I'd like you to read the question out, and you can also try and answer it yourself first. And also don't forget to introduce yourself, yeah?
Okay, so hi guys. To introduce myself, my name is Chang Ru, and I'm also part of Tutors in Action. I'm the executive director. And the question is, you want to be active in youth volunteering, but you don't have the financial ability or you have a tight schedule. What are your plans to continue to be active in youth volunteering despite the constraints? Okay, I think to answer this question, for TIA, I'll take TIA as an example. We don't get funds from any corporate, we don't get sponsored. All we do is volunteering, everything for free. Even for now, we are also planning to have an SPM workshop in end of this year, which is kind of a challenge for us because we are starting from zero and we are trying to provide this for free. And we are also planning to hire a professional broadcasting team to make it, put it on live so that not only Klang Valley people are able to access to this at free SPM workshop, we will be approaching out-of-state schools or even schools in Sarawak and Sabah to offer them this opportunity. Yeah, so all of this, including the transportation to transport SPM students from children's home within Klang Valley. Yeah, we're also providing all of this for free. So this is quite a challenge to us because we don't really have the fund to do so. That's why right now we are trying to get, probably secure some grants from foundation and corporates, hopefully. Yeah, so I think when people think about, when they see this challenge, they'll say like, oh, okay, we shouldn't do this anymore. But just now in the session, what inspired me a lot, one of the speakers you mentioned about, even though the turnout rate will be low, even though you won't be impacting as many students as your target is, as long as there is one person present, as long as there is one person being impacted from what you are doing, I think that's what matters the most. And the growth of you from planning until the post-event mortem, you will be able to gain a lot, not just the students, but also yourself. So don't just think that this is something that will benefit only the students, but you yourself, you also grow when you are planning. You will learn a lot how to communicate, how to plan, how to even work together with other parties, other committee members. I think that's what drives me as a person as well. I love organizing events because I love to enjoy the process of it. Yeah, so that's what drives me to continue doing what we are doing, even though like the financial ability. And for a tight schedule, I kind of relate to this as well because as a student, all our committee members, we are all students. We even have people studying overseas in UK, in US. So the time zone, everything, it's kind of hard to communicate with them, especially in terms of scheduling a meeting. Yeah, sometimes you have to attend meeting during midnight. Yeah, so all of this, I think it's all on communication, and most important is your time management. I believe if you are passionate about one thing, there is nothing stopping you. It's just on the matter of fact, how are you going to organize your time? There's always a time for everything. You just have to find a balance in between. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think those were very wise words, especially the part where you said that if you're passionate about one thing, there'll be nothing stopping you. Because I truly believe that if you really care about something, you will find a way to make time for it in a busy schedule or through whatever difficulties. But yeah. So anyway, we'll move on to our speakers to get their takes on the same question. So I'll read out the question. You want to be active, the same question from before. You want to be active in youth volunteering, but you don't have the financial ability or you have a tight schedule. What are your plans to continue to be active in youth volunteering despite the constraints? Julia, would you like to start? Sure.
I think when you think about youth volunteering, right, or when you think about a movement for change, there's a lot of different roles that people can play, and it doesn't make sense for everybody to be playing the same role. So in the same way, it doesn't make sense for everybody to be contributing financially, and it doesn't make sense for everybody to be giving out all their time, right? So I think it's a very legit concern that you don't have money, you don't have time, but there's other things that you can do. I think is kind of building the network, right? Like if you know, like, oh, I think this person will be interested in this volunteering thing, I can connect the two of them together. Or maybe you're on a pool cable, like, oh, my father can fund the youth organization or something. I ask my father to fund, right? It's different roles that you can play. So you need to find a role that doesn't require finance and doesn't require a time. Is I guess what I offer that. Yeah.
Yes, okay, yeah, I think I have to agree with what she mentioned just now. Like, one of the ways that someone who is not capable of contributing financially or in terms of their time is probably just to spread the information in terms of youth empowerment initiatives. Like, for example, if you notice that there is an event that probably your followers might like it, sharing something on your story of that kind of events would definitely help. Because a fun fact, I actually know about the council movement because I saw an Instagram story back then during the pandemic. The council movement did like a fundraising initiative. It's called Run Council Run, and it was a virtual run. So I was like, how are you going to do a virtual run? Because that time was very new, right? So yeah, that intrigued my interest into looking what the council movement is and what they're doing. So knowing that we do initiatives that tackles education inequality, it's really close to my heart. So I started to join council without even knowing anyone in the organization. So yeah, even as simple as sharing information through stories on Instagram or like even WhatsApp messages, that would definitely help not only the people around you, but also the organizations that's conducting or hosting of the events. Yeah.
For me, I can answer a bit from a technical point of view because my role is actually a volunteer coordinator, and understanding volunteerism is sort of my day-to-day thing. It has a lot of, first and foremost, if you look at volunteering, it has to do a lot with psychology. Yeah? You look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you can ensure to be self-actualized. You can look at self-determination theory, a sense of belonging, and all of that. So it's really, really important to see. But it's also, in the sense that what is very important is for organizations to ensure that the volunteering opportunities that we create do not do more harm to the people who are volunteering. They should not be financially losing by volunteering. They should not be, sacrificing much more than what they need to, according to when they are volunteering. So it's very important to know that the volunteering opportunities that we try to create can come in many different forms. And volunteers, if you don't volunteer, that doesn't mean you're not a good volunteer. You can volunteer by giving your expertise, your advice. That would be considered volunteering, giving that a sense of direction or governance or leadership direction. It could be also volunteers who, we also need to start viewing volunteers as a form of a donor. Yeah? In terms of donors do not necessarily just donate money. Donors can also donate blood. Donors also can donate time. So that's something that when we look at volunteer management or volunteer engagement, it needs to also be looked at through sort of like a donor management as well. We truly value them and not just use them as human assets. And it's also important to see what, as an individual, as a volunteer, so what are your support mechanisms? It's very, very important to look at when I volunteer as well, because my work and I volunteer is almost the same thing, so it's like constantly working. It's very important to know what are your support mechanisms that you have available with you and have like-minded people as well. When you're talking about having discussions earlier about with people in different time zones and all of that, it's also important to have just chit-chat sessions, not really volunteering work related, because through volunteering we develop our networks, we develop relationships, we develop human connections. So that's something also I feel that it's not necessarily volunteering is always altruistic or self-sacrifice, but it's also really self-building as an individual. So you have to balance that out and don't feel bad. You don't have time. You need to pursue money. It's totally understandable. When the time is right, when your needs are met, the important thing is also that we remain the door open for people to come back as well. So yeah, that's my point of view. Thank you.
Yeah, so I know youths don't have money. Most of the time you don't have time as well. Because your primary focus is your education. And I think that is something that everyone needs to keep in mind, that your job is to graduate. Yeah, so you have to toe the line, right? And even with your parents as well. Because if they are funding your education, you are responsible for that, right? You are accountable to what happens. So I understand. But one thing, and I think this was already mentioned earlier, that is super easy for you to do that isn't time consuming or even requires any funds is, and I'm saying this because I noticed this, that you'd spend a lot of time on social media. How you curate your social media is what I would probably focus on, right? So if you have a heart to work or you have a burden to actually look at the social impact space, which is the space that we are all in right now, what can you do there? You can follow all of our organizations, right? You can see what is happening, and then you can share opportunities that come up. It doesn't take much. You can keep it at the back of your mind to say that, I have a friend who is maybe now looking for an opportunity. Word of mouth is also very important. And usually word of mouth is what works, right? Not everybody is going to be very comfortable with, I saw something on social media, I'm just going to turn out there and see what happens. There has to be that trust. You need to build trust. So organizations need to build trust with their volunteers. And volunteers also need to build trust with the organization that they want to volunteer for. And how do you do this? It's a process. It is not going to happen overnight. And most of the time, I would also encourage you to try and volunteer with a friend. Don't do it alone, because it could become very burdensome. It's always better to have a buddy, so you pair with someone where you can share your problems with. And like we mentioned that it's not all on you when you volunteer, right? Don't take the burden of the world and put it on your shoulder. You are not meant to solve the problems. You cannot solve the problems. We also cannot solve the problems. The government cannot solve the problems. So put that aside, right? Put that aside. But what is a small thing that you can do, and what is within your locus of control and your sphere of influence? Act on that. Act on that. You don't have to come from a super influential family to do this, right? You can come from any aspect or any walks of life, and you can make a difference. So that's one thing I always say, is that if you want to make a difference, you will find a way to make a difference. So personally for me, right, what I always say is, I work in a whole bunch of industries, right, but this is the only industry where I very consciously made a decision to enter in. Only because I told myself that at the end of my career, or at the end of when I'm done already, right? What happens, right? What do I want to leave behind? I want to know that I've done something. I don't have to see what I've done. I don't have to know that I have done it, right? But I need to understand that every action that I take and every decision that I have made has contributed to somebody's life. I don't need to know who benefited from it. It's just for me to know, yes, this will one day benefit somebody. Somebody's life will be changed. Somebody's life will be touched, right? That is all I need to know. So from there on, it's like, what do I choose to do next? So that is just something. What do you want to achieve? Work backwards, right? It's always a good idea to think big and then go like, okay, so how do I start? What is the first step that I take to get there? Again, it's a process, and you don't have to do it all. Another thing is that no judgment. This is a judgment-free space, right? You do what you can, and that's enough, right? That is absolutely enough. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I think that made a lot of sense, especially the part where you said volunteering with a friend. I think that definitely makes such a big difference when you do something like this, because it becomes more than just volunteering. There's a social aspect of it that makes it easier. It kind of drives people our age to do that. Thank you so much to our speakers. We're going to move on to the next question. So the next question is, how the ideas or initiatives to empower youth have changed over time,
And how do you see it impacting the future of the youth? Julia, would you like to start?
Yeah, okay. So at the Council Movement, as I mentioned previously, we're the longest motivational camp run by students, and it was established in 1984, so previously it was probably like a motivational camp, 5 days, 4 nights. Some of us have probably been into one where we sing Gemuruh Jiwa by Faisal Tahir, maybe, yeah. So to answer the first part of the question, how the initiatives to empower youth has changed over time, is I think that it's really depending on how the group of youth we want to empower change over time as well, like how the generation has changed. Because at the moment, our committee members, facilitators, and even beneficiaries are among the Gen Z, so we cater our initiatives to them. As mentioned by our previous speakers, even during the first session, the pandemic really affected the educational experience of a lot of students in Malaysia. So when a lot of them didn't have the conducive environment to learn in online settings back then, it really hindered them back, and most of them are lost in terms of their interests, and also like in hope whether they can actually continue to pursue education after SPM in the tertiary level. So how we do it in Council Movement is that one of our programs is a mentorship program, where previously was conducted in a week, but this year we noticed that we want to make a bigger impact. So what we do is we elongate the program into a few sessions, and it's stretched out in several months. So from there we can see like the growth of the students, and it wouldn't be as one-off compared to like a one-week program. So that's how we cater our initiatives to the current generation. So I would say that's how it changed over time, entirely depending on how the youth we want to empower change as well. And how do you see it impacting the future youth is, I would say that this doesn't really depend on the generation. I think ever since the beginning in Council, when we do programs with our beneficiaries, like one of our pillars is nurturing the Council spirit. So when we share to them like why we do programs under the Council Movement, because we want to tackle education inequality. So our beneficiaries themselves, they realize that there shouldn't be a barrier between them in learning something. Like they can learn what they want, not just because of you're in a certain class where they're all like smart students, so they can only learn this, and students from the classes of probably not as good as them have to learn something specific, if that makes sense. So so when they understand that there is an issue of education inequality among themselves, and in the future when they get into university, they would probably join Council and want to impact other people as well. And we actually have some of our beneficiaries who where the Council Movement went to their school, and eventually when they get into uni, they actually become our organizing committee. So that's like, I would say, a long-term impact that not only is happening previously now, but I think it can also happen in the future in Council, where our beneficiaries ourselves are aware of such issues, and they would want to contribute in the future by being a part of us. So yeah, that's my take on this question.
Yeah, so I'll answer next. So, was how does how has it changed?
You read it out for you.
Yeah.
How have the ideas or initiatives to empower youth have changed over time, and how do you see impacting the future of the youth?
Yeah, thanks for refreshing the question. I think, speaking on behalf of the Red Cross and Red Crescent, I think how we have changed in the way of empowering young people. I can share with you definitely an initiative that we launched during the global pandemic in 2020. It was under the GYM, the Global Youth Mobilization Generation Limitless. We launched this Limitless project whereby we set up a fund of about 500,000 CHF. We deal in Swiss francs internationally, don't ask me why, because our headquarters is in Geneva, Switzerland. So it's about 600,000 US dollars, and we encourage young people to submit their ideas on how does COVID impact their communities at the local level, and to come up with sort of a small-scale solution and to test it out with a small grant of 500 CHF, which is about 2,500, 3,000 ringgit on a small scale first to test it out. It's sort of generating that sort of incubation and innovation kind of hub. And we didn't ask for a lot of requirements. That was the unique thing for the first time for the Red Cross and Red Crescent, which we hardly do, because whenever we give money, it's always with certain conditions, right? We are accountable to our donors. But this was the first time that we were trying this for young people, just to pitch their ideas through a 1 or 2 minute video, just to talk about their idea, and based on that, we would fund them accordingly. And the thing is, one thing great I think that was also changing was not just giving them money, but also equipping them with the right skills in terms of project management, the soft skills that sometimes we think we just give the money to the young people and they do their thing, that will be enough. I think it's not enough. We should definitely do more to help guide them, to help them also be more aware of how the world works, right? When you talk about requesting for grants and all that, because sometimes even small-scale organizations don't know how to do a proposal to request from, let's say, the EU or something that is more substantial. So that's something we did. We funded about 2,000 projects. In Malaysia, it was about 5 of them were selected. And it was very inspiring and motivating to the young people, especially within the Malaysian Red Crescent, our youth, because it's the first time that we've given them this independence and this freedom to come up with an idea, to test it, and of course some of it were successes, some of it were not as successful as we hoped it to be, but it's fine. That's part of learning, right? It's part of how we grow, and for those who were more successful, we will give them more funding in terms of seed funding. So that's how we observe, at least within our environment, how the way we empower young people have changed. And I think this gives a bit more responsibility and trust that the young people will be able to see that our leaders or organizations are actually giving them more responsibilities and trust in terms of running their own projects. So we're trying to move away of viewing as youth from just being the hands and legs of our organizations to actually being the brains of our organizations as well. And that's something that we are striving very hard, of course, and it's a constant battle, it's a constant fight to do that. And I think through this exercise and through the effort that we've done globally as well, we can see that there is also a shift in terms of leadership mindset towards young people as well. That giving them a bit of leeway, a bit of freedom can go much more beyond that as well. So that's something we're trying to encourage and hope that it will one day be something of a norm and we do not longer see this as an obstacle as well. So yeah, that's it from our side. Thank you.
I think in general, the mindset has shifted, right? Like what Gerald said, like instead of viewing young people as hands and legs and manpower, you go to an event and you set up the chairs, whatever. It's really shifted to more of like, oh, okay, young people can actually do things, they can actually lead, right? And I think part of this also came about with the lowering of the voting age in 2019, and then when it was gazetted in 2021 and properly enforced. So I think in general there's a really big shift from general public as well as the people in power that, oh, okay, the young people are a force to be reckoned with and we need to start treating them properly. But on the flip side of this, right, is that the more responsibility that you're given, the higher the standard you are held up to. And as young people especially, they or we are held up to an even higher standard compared to anyone else, right? Like if a old politician makes a mistake, no one bats an eye. The moment a young politician does something like, you know, they, I don't know, maybe they typo in their tweet or something, everybody go and taro them. So I think that definitely is, it definitely impacts the future of the youth, right? That such a high standard. But I think that that's also why that youth ecosystem is needed to support young people, to mentor them, and in return, young people also kind of, the responsibility is to take that idealism and also temper it with a willingness to like collaborate, be open, to listen. So, well, I guess because both Kelsom and Red Crescent have plugged their stuff, I also want to plug. So, AOD has this program called Campus Advocacy, right, where it's for college students, and you come in, you will learn about conflict negotiation, you will go through simulations, and at the end of it, you also be empowered to run your own project in your own community, dealing with inclusivity, dealing with diversity, and how to build a more inclusive and equitable community. So it's happening on 1st to 4th December during sem break, so keep your eyes out for that. But again, I think, yeah, that I think it's really tough to be a young person now, honestly, because the standards are so high. I really don't envy it, but know that no matter how tough it is, there are still people out there who are willing to back you and who are willing to support you. You just need to find them if they don't find you first. Yeah.
Okay, how the ideas and initiatives. I think there's two parts to this question, right? One part is the power of youth has significantly changed in the last, I want to say, 5 years. And the one example that I can really think of, which is really powerful to the youth, is the passing of the 2018 bill. It was led by youth, pushed for by youth, but yes, of course, supported by adults and your politicians and parliamentarians and everything. But the idea, the way it originated from, right? It's a really interesting story. I'm sure there's a clip somewhere out there of Kira and Dharma explaining how this idea came about. And I encourage you to look it up and listen and watch it, I guess. But if a group of youth had this vision of, I want to change the law of a country, and trust me, laws are not easy to change. They're not easy to change. But they pushed it through, and in a very short timeline as well. I will ask the question of, is there anything that you cannot do really if you don't set your mind to it, right? It's not going to be easy. No one's going to say, oh, this is going to be super easy or anything. Everything is going to be hard. Life is hard. Okay, life is not easy. But you still have to live life, right? So why not push or try to achieve something that you really feel for? If you really believe that this is going to make a difference to my community, to me, to my friends, and to a certain extent to the country as well, I would say go for it, right? We have seen changes happen. And on top of that, I have personally seen young people set up many social impact organizations. One of it is actually AOD. So Jason, who works with Charlene, used to intern at Teach for Malaysia. So he was there, he learned, he observed, I guess. And he already had a vision, right? He had this want and this need to do something. And he went and he did it, right? He set up AOD, and AOD is like super successful now, and I really love them. And again, Bundi 18 is another one, right? So Kira worked at Teach for Malaysia. She was a staff member. And then she went and did, gone ahead and done whatever else she wants to do. So everyone plugs, so I'm going to shamelessly plug now. The fellowship program. So Teach for Malaysia's flagship program is called the fellowship program. And essentially the fellowship program, what it does is two things. It builds capacity
it builds leadership skills among fellows, right? And while you yourself are developing yourself, you are developing the next generation because you are placed in high need schools. These are students and children that don't necessarily and rarely have opportunities. By you doing this fellowship and being placed in these communities, you actually impact the life of a child, a life of a classroom. You're bringing opportunities to them that they will not have, right? And at the same time, you are also developing all these different sets of skills. Right now, we are recruiting, by the way, so if you are interested, just log on online, teachformalaysia.org, and you can have an info session. So we run a lot of info sessions. There is somebody who's always willing to have a chat with you about what the opportunity is, what you will do, how the journey would be. So we've had 10 cohorts of fellows, right? So we have 10 cohorts of alumni right now. And all of our alumni have gone on to do amazing, amazing things. They have set up organizations like Arus Academy. They have set up organizations like Closing the Gap. They have set up organizations like Mind Readers. So these are all, so like I said, the education inequity is like, it's a wicked problem. It's a monster by itself. It's so complex, right? Everybody, there are so many gaps. It's up to everybody to see where these gaps are and what can they contribute. How do I, as an individual, see a problem, break down that problem, and what can I do to help solve that problem? You have to break the system down because it's a system, right? It's a system that is set up, it's so old, it's so complex. You have to break it down before you are able to make any form of change. And don't get me wrong, there has been many changes that have happened over the last couple of years, right? And people have fought in front, publicly, but also a lot of things that happen behind the scenes as well. So one of the things that we also want is, for Teach for Malaysia as well, we are a leadership development. We want to develop leaders from all the different areas. We want to develop leadership skills in our fellows, so graduate students, right? Graduates, let us help you develop all these skills, right? And then you come out, once you finish your 2 years of fellowship, you come out and you enter the different workforce, different spaces in the workforce, and you contribute over there, right? So you become a part of this community that is working to try and fix the system from different aspects. Because education doesn't just belong to the government. It belongs to everybody, right? Everybody has a role to play. You are either a beneficiary of it or you are a person who is participating in some way or form of it, right? So it's not, you cannot at any point take a step out and say, this is not my problem. Because it is your problem. Further down the road, right, once you have kids of your own, they have to enter the education space. Is this the space, is now what it looks like? Is that what you want your children to be in? If it's not, then what can you do to help fix it, right? And it's not just education, it's also community. How do you help the community build and develop and evolve? Because communities are what makes the country, right? You don't have a country if you don't have communities. So like, I think AOD, Charlene, she mentioned how polarized our society is right now. There's a reason for it. I won't get into the details of it, but there is a reason for this, right? Certain parties will say, oh, the education system. But actually, no, it's not just the education system, right? There's so many, it's also the media, it's all these other aspects of how the community interacts with each other. So what roles are we playing to try and help this, right? To try and bridge gaps, basically. I feel like young people have and I mentioned this, have a very high sense of optimism and a lot of hope, right? And a lot more braver as well. The courage level is a lot higher than, I guess, people in their mid to late 30s, 40s and above lah. And I see this because like with the Lawan movement that had happened over the pandemic, right? It wasn't old people it was the older generation of activists who stood at the back and said, this is now your time. And what did the young people do then? So that is how you need to think, right? You can't always rely. You will maybe one day become a politician. You could become a policy maker. You could become an MP. You could become Menteri, right? So these are all options available to you. You could become the CEO of a multinational corporation. But on your journey there, and when you get there, what are you going to be doing? And like I said, life is a journey, right? So go take it as a journey. You gotta live it. You gotta live your life. And it doesn't have to be a sad life, okay? It is what you make it to be, right? If you want to enjoy it, enjoy it. Do all these different things. Do life. What I always say is do life with others. Like I mentioned earlier, volunteer with a friend. That's where you build community. You make friends who are outside your bubble and outside your usual space. Expand your network. Guys, now is the time for you to expand your network because you have no idea how important a network is going to be when you graduate and when you enter the workforce. Think about things like this, right? So, yes, the future of the youth is basically the future of the country. I know it's a heavy burden to place on you, but this was told to me when I was a youth as well. And at that point, I'm just like, I cannot do anything, right? You tell me this, what you want me to do? But it was like bite-sized. What can I do now in the space that I'm currently living in? What can I do? Work on that, work towards that, and then see where it goes, right? Don't say that, and don't put lofty goals. Don't reach for the sun, moon, stars, and sky, please. Make it achievable, and take step by step, basically, right? Do that step by step, and trust me, I have seen youths do amazing things, and I don't doubt youths. I'll never doubt youths, to be honest, because if you tell them to do something, right, and give them basically nothing, they will still go and figure a way and do it, and then you're like, excellent. I give multinational corporations billions so they cannot do this. So young people have this sense of optimism, which I think is of such a big value that they bring to the country on a whole as well. So before I end, please go and apply for the fellowship.
Thank you so much from our 4 speakers. It was very great. And yeah, they have all also plugged whatever they needed to plug. So go ahead and search it up. We're going to move on to the closing ceremony after this. So once again, we'd like to thank all of the speakers for coming here and giving us a very interactive session. Let's give them a round of applause. Okay, we're going to move on to the photo session. Right? So can we have everybody in the front, like the speakers in the first 2 rows, and then everybody else can sort of come to the middle, and then we can take a group photo.
Go.
Okay, so please remain seated. We're gonna head on to give our certificates to the NGOs. So we'll call it out one by one and you can come ahead in front. So the first one, we'd like to present it to Sherry. Okay, next up to Charlene. Next up, Anis. Charlene. Amanda. Julia. Anushka. Ida. Gerald. And lastly to Keisha.
Okay, hi everyone. Luckily, you already wrapped the program. So basically, I would like to thank everyone for making time to attend our first ever speaker series. The participation rate might be a bit low, but I hope that we can continue this event for the upcoming years, and because of that, we can gain more traction over the years. So I would really like to thank all 9 NGOs, Council Movement, Teach for Malaysia, Tutors in Action, AOD, Pam from CM, Parley Women, AOD, Sustainable Youth Summit, Tuka, Sukarelawan Society. Thank you so much. MSS, thank you so much. So I hope, because you guys helped to collaborate for our first ever speaker series, then obviously we would reach out to you guys first when we do it over the next few years. So thank you so much for making time and contributing to a better cause for the future. Okay, thank you.
Alright, thank you guys. That's a wrap for the first